Yeah, I had a lot of questions for the next topic about quality metrics because I'm going through the pain of it at my new company and defining quality metrics. And I apologize, but the theme of The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey kept going through my head. So if it's really cheesy as you go through this presentation, I apologize, but I thought it would be fun. But it has really felt like an unexpected journey. And I don't know if your experience with quality metrics tends to be that way too. But it can always be very unexpected as you uncover quality issues and quality problems. So yeah, if you read my intro on Meetup, it's definitely, I stole it from the movie synopsis of The Hobbit and an Unexpected Journey. So yeah, you'll get to see the cheesiness of this. So. And feel free to, like Kevin said, jump in with your experiences on quality metrics, questions, contradictions, anything that contributes to this topic is welcome. So feel free to jump in. I'll talk a little bit about me, and then I'm going to go through and just share my recent experience and then some of my past quality metrics journeys. I'm going to share what I've learned along the way and definitely share your experience and ask questions. In this presentation, there's a lot of things that you could read. It's kind of busy because it feels like this journey drowning in data and information. So I can share these slides so you don't have to feel like you have your cybersecurity line to Fidelity. Again, verify that. Yeah, I actually have been in the software industry for over 20 years. I have 2 careers in the software industry. I was a technical writer for 11.5 years at Cersei Dynix and then went into quality management very quickly at Cersei Dynix. And I was there during a time where Cersei Dynix was transitioning from a water model to an agile model, and we were a case study for Jeff Sutherland, who's one of the fathers of agile Scrum methodology. And so we were part of that, and part of our metrics were tracking some of the productivity around that and the quality around that. Then I went to which was a data visualization company, and visualizations, you have a lot of metrics. Our Corda was purchased by Josh James, became Domo, so I was there for a couple of years, and then, like I said, business analytics and data visualization, just lots of metrics there. Then I went into cybersecurity space. I've been there for the last 7, almost 8 years. Access Data I was a manager over QA manager over a e-discovery product, which is kind of a electronic discovery for forensic analysis and legal analysis. And we also had a cybersecurity end product, which does endpoint detection and response. And that product line was sold off to Fidelis. And at Fidelis, I became a QA manager or a QA director over their 3 product lines. We had a network cybersecurity product, and cybersecurity product, and a deception cybersecurity product, and had to do a lot of measuring and metrics there, because in the cybersecurity space, quality becomes a lot higher value, but also tends to in some ways slow down the process. So I loved, if y'all saw Carlos's slide on the actual software development life cycle, those tended to be slower in the cybersecurity space because they're a lot more careful, and adoption is a lot slower in the customer side for those systems. And then the last year I've been at Venafi. It's a company that's the leader in machine identity protection software. It's one that's in the cybersecurity stack. And we just acquired JetStack, which is the leader in secure Kubernetes DevOps. And so we've got some enterprise, very on-prem heavy type software. We also have some cloud software products that our company supports. So that's the overview, the background. So this was the beginning of the quest. I get back from vacation July 10th, and my VP of engineering, or my wizard VP of engineering, comes to me and says, CEO says that engineering needs some orcs or occurs. So I always get the 2 mixed up because it always sounds like orcs, but it's occurs. So there you go. So again, a Hobbit theme, cheesy. Anyway, I established some occurs. We want some product quality metrics, and we want the benchmarks. I need the proposal by the end of July, and we're going to start meeting these benchmarks and implementing meeting these benchmarks so that by December 30th, we prove that we've accomplished some of these quality occurs or objectives by key results is really what it is. If you've read the book, Measure What Matters. It's an interesting book about occurs and objectives by key results. But that's not my given myself. He's right here, so doesn't look as like scary and powerful. And then this was my face, because well, this is part of my of test strategy and performance at Venafi. This is one of, many aspects to focus on when it comes to test strategy. But it made a lot of sense as I've gotten my feet under me over the last year. As I started digging into this, it made a lot of sense that I was like, maybe I should have started with the data. But yes, this was definitely my face when he was telling me all the objectives and timelines on this. So I had a lot of questions. Where do I start? Do I just go ahead and do the regular quality metrics? Are those really enough? I knew that there were some quality problems. As I was looking at Venafi, they are very good in quality processes, but they're not very quick. And so what we have right now is an organization that is in that kind of fragile scrum fall model. Those terms are pretty familiar to you probably, where as you transition from a waterfall module to an agile model in software development, it kind of becomes a hybrid of both. And we're really wanting to step up that level of organization to become a more continuous testing CI/CD model. We have a lot of tools in place, but sometimes the process itself is still pretty slow. Our whole is on a quarterly basis. Customers don't implement our product very quickly. It's very on-prem heavy security product. Anyway, process things, a lot of questions. There's so many other questions, but for me, it's like, why is this always so hard? Every single time I get into an organization, or we kind of go, we have a quality problem, we need to step back, and we've been in this status for a while. Just hard kind of always get back into what are the quality metrics, where do I start, what are the marks, and so that was hard for me. I don't know if you guys have had experiences like that, if you're like, that's easy. So this is where I started this time around. I kind of thought about the quality problems that I'd been encountering as I'd been getting to know the company over the last year and how things worked. Started, of course, Google and trying to find experts, but I really also started talking to internal people and stakeholders about the quality problems, about quality data that mattered. Talked to, of course, my VP of engineering, quality tech leads, product management, customer support people, and just started some of those conversations about what are the quality problems, what kind of data do we have to work with, what kind of framework do we have to work with, and just kind of started formulating some conversations and some relationships by just asking questions around quality. And I think that starts opening up some people to some of the questions that kind of need as you start trying to dig into how I'm going to highlight the quality problems, and then not only how am I going to highlight the quality problems with quality metrics, but then how do I continue to have conversations around the data, around the quality problems, and how do we continue to have those conversations with those stakeholders to improve. So people tend to more open if you start asking them questions about quality metrics, where they think that, than if you were to say, I think your quality problem is this, especially as coming in new and as an outsider to an organization. So started there. And then I decided I needed to create a quality metrics framework, define what quality is, what is the gold in the cave that really is your company's definition of quality. Everybody has a little bit different definition of that. Each company has a different acceptance, if you will. So getting on this page about what quality is, talking about metrics that would match that. So started having those kind of conversations, and just really tried to start figuring out, how do I put this all together into a framework that then all of us can work from when it comes to having quality conversations. And really, what is the key kind of piece to that? So I ended up defining what quality is at a high level, and then dug into it as far as what does quality mean for software quality, and decided to take a few pieces from a couple of different places. Joseph Duran's quality, he really does, I think, nail it. And even Mike Kahn at Mountain Goat Software uses this definition as well, where he says that real quality is, you know, what's fit for the end user or the members of society who are going to be using this product. That is quality. Quality is fitness for use, which is a very simple definition, but really drives it home that the focus is on the customer, which is also part of Agile methodology tendencies, where access and getting the product to the customer and feedback from the customer is a very integral part of Agile methodology. And then as you break down, okay, what is fitness for use when it comes to software? There's a few models out there, and we chose the FERPS model, which again is pretty old, but actually pretty easy to remember, because FERPS Plus is just an acronym for the functionality, usability, reliability, performance, supportability. And this is an older IBM, older HP framework that then IBM improved on with the Plus, which moves quality even more upstream to your design requirements, your implementation requirements, interface requirements, physical requirements, really moves that quality examination higher upstream. So as an organization, we decided this was our definition of quality and software quality, and we were going to continue to use this terminology, especially around FERPS Plus, and that our focus would be around the customer and these FERPS attributes for software quality as we continue to work on our quality metrics framework. Any thoughts or questions about your struggles with defining quality? I know Carlos, again, was touching on some things here and there just before this conversation. Any questions, thoughts? Or are we all here to learn from my pain? All right, feel free to jump in though. Okay. Establishing good objectives can be hard. Yes, and we'll go through that journey as well. And if I miss somebody's questions, still feel free to jump in if I miss your question on chat. Yes, the objectives can be hard. So as we took the high-level definition of quality and of software quality attributes and drilled into that, we came up with some particular product quality metrics. And again, these metrics are pulled from multiple places, multiple sources. As I was Googling, did not find one good, aha, this is the framework we need to use. But we decided as a company, as a management team, actually with a lot of feedback from other stakeholders, these would be our product quality metrics: customer reported problems, defect density reported by the customer, overall customer satisfaction, some of the satisfaction when in regards to the product quality, and some of the FERPS pieces. As you break down into FERPS, if you study FERPS, there's actually some smaller components of those main 5 levels of FERPs. Our time to failure, our detectable effectiveness, production, percent support, things like that. But it was all quality focused on what the customer experience is. And that for us became product quality metrics. And that's what is our definition of quality, is some of these metrics and what they mean. And then after we got, and one of the problems with these metrics is that they're lagging indicators. They, you might not get rapid feedback, especially in the position that we're currently in, where our customers don't upgrade their software for 6 months to a year, maybe more. And so you really don't get this feedback quickly enough, but it is a necessary piece of feedback that defines your product quality. And so with that, we also looked at additional quality metrics that we categorized on the FERPS model and put them under each category. And some of these are leading indicators, and some of these are also lagging indicators. It just depends, but we wanted to put them in the category that we could measure FERPS quality attributes under. And so this is where some of your dashboards might come into play as you start, you know, looking at some of the FERPS metrics and start to create some dashboards. I still Kevin's, because I've seen his presentation on metrics. But this is where some of your dashboards come in with your leading indicators, especially where you're looking at what do our in-house metrics look like? What bugs are we finding in-house? What is our test case coverage? Things like that. Sorry if my voice quality is bad. Maybe I'll pull my computer closer. And this is most of the framework. There was one other piece of our framework that came into play, and these were some important pieces for our quality metric that we decided we needed. We needed quality goals or KPIs, because you can have all these metrics, but if you don't know what your measure assesses, then they don't really matter. You don't really know what you're working towards when you're measuring what you're measuring. And so you needed to have a goal or a measure of success or a benchmark with some sort of way to know you were good or you were doing bad. And the other thing is putting those metrics into some sort of visualization. And for me, that's really important, because after being at Domo, I continue to try to put dashboards together. And this is the first time since I've left Domo that I've been back into Domo was at Venafi, because I was able to show that value of how taking your quality metrics, putting to a tool that has real-time data. This, when most of our quality metrics will be in a lot of different data sources. It depends what piece of your quality pipeline you might be working on, or you know, it's not just about test results, it's about the bugs, so that's in a different data source. So really, you need to have a data visualization tool. And I played around with Metabase, and some of our performance metrics are in Metabase, which also connects to a lot of data sources. But I'm really excited about getting started with Domo and getting started with that. For us, about having this quality metrics framework where we define quality, we define software quality attributes, we define that there's benchmarks or goals that we need, and we need to visualize it, is that people started having a common language and understanding of quality and quality metrics. And we started going on this journey together around quality and the metrics we wanted to measure around quality, and started uniting around quality. Whereas when I came here, there was just places, different opinions about quality and what it meant. And so there were conflicts around that as well, between a quality lead and a product owner who tended to prioritize the bugs as well as features, and tended to be more feature friendly than technical debt friendly, things like that. But we started having some common language and a common ground that we could work from when it came to quality. Any thoughts or questions, and did you catch all of that?
Yeah, I did have one question. With your visualizations that you had there, we did something very similar. And one of the issues we had was getting people to actually pay attention and be aware of all the metrics. And we tried, we had them up on big TVs at all of the teams' areas, and we send out emails and we posted things on Slack. And it still seemed like, we get together in trainings and people would be surprised that those metrics were something we cared about. Have you had any issues with that, or how did you get people to be aware and bought into those metrics that you created?
And this is where the work can come in, especially if you're trying to minimize meetings and don't have, well, even we have a weekly status meeting, right? We're watching certain metrics, and we all, a lot of stakeholders get together in one room and talk about metrics for 30 minutes towards a release goal. So we have a forum to talk about those metrics already established, but I still had to do a lot of meetings and evangelizing with each individual Scrum team. I mean, that's how I approached it, is that, I continue to have to talk to each Scrum team, but they also know that this gets visibility across all layers of the organization in a weekly status meeting. And so there's visibility and accountability, and we're talking about it. There needs to be opportunities to discuss it and highlight it and talk about the concerns. At least that's what I've experienced. When you just have an email that gets sent out, we usually find it does get ignored, but there's not an improvement. There needs to be continuous conversations as well. And that's that really is part of an agile methodology, right? We value communication, documentation. And while we're documenting through metrics what's going on with quality, the conversation is still pretty valuable and pretty key. We cannot get away from conversations. Just don't like them sometimes, or we want to work rather than stop and have continuous conversations are super key. Someone else might have a better experience to share, but that's what I've found.
Maybe could I share something? Something that I've explained to employees as I've moved from an individual contributor to a manager is something as simple as being out of the office. I always thought as an individual contributor that my manager would care that I was out of the office. And so I just assumed that when I sent out that notification that, hey, I'm going to be out of the office for a week, and it's a big deal, right? It's a big vacation. I'm going to the Bahamas or wherever, that my manager would remember that I was going to be out of the office. And then on Tuesday, he would send out this message that says, hey, Kevin, can you check into this? And I'm like, dude, I am on vacation and I've had this on the calendar for 3 months. Why are you asking me this question? But the reality is, as a manager, it really, unfortunately, isn't important until it is important. And so there's these things that we overlook, and metrics are definitely one of them. When it comes to sharing metrics that I find are so important, and my managers told me that they were important, right? So they really are important. They don't care though until that moment comes when they say, oh, Kevin, I asked you for this metric. Do you have this information? And then suddenly that dashboard that I put together is really important. And until then, it just sits there, which is also why, again, plug for Domo and anything else that's real-time updates. I don't have to go update it again. I just sound like a broken record. Yes, manager, if you go to the same dashboard that I already shared with you, hey, if you look up on the TV screen where we already have displayed those metrics, you'll see that you have the answers that you were looking for. And eventually I got some traction, and managers would then share with other managers, hey, yeah, we already have that. And in fact, if everybody would just put their same metrics in this one place, we could all go to the same place. Anyway, some thoughts from my experience.
For my experience, metrics is a trigger word, but I'm curious if these are metrics that you really want the individual Scrum teams to eventually take ownership of, rather than having to have QA take ownership of them?
I would like to, but at least in my experience throughout the last 12 years, I haven't found, I found the rare Scrum team that does, most Scrum teams don't. I always find there's a rare Scrum team that does want to, and they all buy into organically owning quality at all levels and the visualization and the reporting of that quality, but those are the rare ones. So as much as I'd like to, and also it depends on your organization. So, you know, as you mature, you also need a consistency and a consistent language. And so you almost need something more centrally manageable and focused. It can be QA. It could be, you know, that you have a business analyst who says, you know, we're going to use Domo, so plug in your data here, and as long as it meets this criteria, looks like this, you can manage it. But I like that. Most of the time, being a QA manager or QA director in charge of test strategy, that has been my role. So,
okay.
Any other thoughts about?
Kind of an extreme example, but what eventually worked for us. I love the way you said a feature-friendly product owner. We had several of those. What finally ended up happening is we had metrics mostly around test passing, and if the tests from the previous day were below a certain threshold, everything was immediately reverted, all code from the previous day. And so I felt like that was extreme, but finally the product owners got behind, okay, we have to, if we want to get our new features in, we have to get the quality up. And that, I think, worked for us, but it was a big ask.
Yeah, I think you're right. When you feel the pain in some way, especially product owners, when they pain, they're going to be more inclined to make changes. And
no worries. One question I had was, and anyone can answer this, was why do you think it's so difficult for teams to get behind quality? That seems like such a fundamental thing. Like, hey, build something that's good, that delights your customer, that solves their problems. You know, like, why do we feel like that's such a difficult thing for them to grasp and get behind?
Yeah.
One thing I have seen, and it was very inadvertent, but we called him our release train. I don't know. He was kind of the head of the release. At all of our company meetings, we would do, every 3 months, we would do a large meeting with all of the teams. And the things he would put all the emphasis on was all the new features. He'd go up and he'd speak about what we had accomplished last, and it was always about what new features went in. It was never about how our quality improved. And I think that inadvertently, you know, the developers feel that, well, that's what they're talking about, so that's what's important.
I think for us, at least, I'm going to say it, we're really lucky. Our developers drive all of our quality metrics for their individual teams, and QA never has to manage or track any of that stuff, because every team is really dedicated to making sure that they're putting out quality products. You know, they manage their work stops thresholds for when they've got too many bugs and too many issues in production. So, and then also QA does not have OKRs. We will not have OKRs. A QA person's job is to facilitate the OKRs of the team that they're on. And so a QA person's OKRs are based on whatever the team's OKRs are. We tried writing OKRs for about a year, and it just felt, you know, for testers that are like, it just didn't make a lot of sense for what they were doing and the way they're doing it. So, but it is a good question. I think if you hire the right people and you've got some passionate people about quality, like, it's a lot easier for your Scrum teams to start taking on that quality metric themselves and worrying about like what kind of builds go out and how quality it is, and whether they built new features or whether they have dealt with technical debt. But it is a slow process to build that culture.
One thing we did at Workfront was the quality organization gave almost like a template to the teams, like here are the metrics and things that we care about. But it's just like a starting point. And then as the dev teams were like, all right, we have to care about these things now. They'd go a few sprints and be like, I don't like this data point. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for us because this. I'm like, cool. So what do you want to change? Why don't you like it? What would you rather have instead? Why would I rather have this? There you go. You're making your own metrics, man. They're like, oh, okay. Like it was like, what matters to your team, your product way better than I do. So I'm giving you a template, but this is just a starting point. If there's something you don't like, yeah, it probably doesn't make sense. So tweak it yourself. And then the team started owning their own metrics and they understood the why behind their own metrics. And yeah, we made it so the teams managed and created their own measurements of success. And yes, we do have like things we have like evergreen things you measure. You have these master things that will be across all the teams. But other than that, most of the metrics are generated by the team and maintained by them.
Yeah. I think kind of related to that is that you once you get the dev team themselves worrying about or thinking about the quality of what they're releasing, kind of our next step was to say, okay, now when we do a release, the devs all go and test their things in production. And our point there was like, well, yes, your one tester could go validate all that in production for you, but it's way faster if each dev on the team individually goes and validates the thing that they built because they know it the best and they can make sure it's working the best. We've already done all the testing. We just want to make sure it got to production safely. So I think like once you get the dominoes falling, it can end up in a pretty good place.
As an extreme
example.
example.
I actually have started seeing some of that in this organization because we were feature, but felt like they've been actually shift their focus to a more quality-centered focus, and they've been doing some of their own changes, which has been interesting too. And they don't necessarily even do some of the things we decided as an organization for consistency in quality. It's been fascinating actually to watch some of these things. Okay, I think I'm set. We'll see if we go to the next topic and what happens next. Told everybody to get off the internet. So hopefully they're off. I was on the right slide. Let's go through. Sorry about that. After we got through the framework, all the way over here, hopefully you're not motion sick, then we started taking what we had defined in the framework and putting benchmarks around that so that we knew what the goals were, what the benchmarks were. And this is where I was looking for what are the industry standards, because I'm not sure sometimes where I should start, where I should put those levels. And some of those industry standards are out there, and then some of them were internal definitions, like this one about lagging indicators, about the amount of support tickets coming in to engineering, and you know, what was a fire piece of junk software that should be thrown away. Those came from some internal discussions about what's good, what's bad, and once you start having those discussions of what's good and bad with whatever your quality metrics are, you really start being able to have good quality discussions internally about what needs to improve, why does it need to improve, let's make it a priority, because now everybody's looking at that same benchmark and saying, oh, that is bad. We need to fix this, which has been really helpful as well. Any experiences with benchmarks, industry standards, knowing what's good and what's bad with quality? Is it more fluid for some of you? Is it pretty well defined in your organizations? So yeah, for me, this was actually super helpful, was to start drawing lines in the sand. about what's best in class, maybe what's average and acceptable, what's just bad on different attributes, both for the lagging indicators and the leading indicators. Some of them were harder to put a number on, which is much easier to really see the good or the bad. It was more about kind of a consistent flow rather than an actual set number. And so we're still working through what are those benchmarks, what do they mean to us, and what's out there that we could just start from, which is mostly why I'm looking for industry standards on some of these benchmarks so that I could have a place to start. I don't know if you guys use those as well. Yeah. Yeah, I think the threshold, and that's why some of this is so hard, is because one of the comments was companies and teams have varying levels of risk tolerance. And so it does depend on the company, the team, the culture, and very feature service as well, absolutely. So these are the things that make it hard for sure. Let's see. Make sure I'm on my screen. So then I started playing with the data, and this is where, especially when you know there's a quality problem in some aspect or another and you need to find the data to support it, this is where you can kind of go into those dark places and those caves and really find highlight the problems. But that's part of our job, is to really find no matter where it is, where the quality or process problems are. And so as I started digging in, and making them visual, even if it was like this below slide here, where I was visualizing our test pyramid. At the time I was putting it together, we didn't have a tool to visualize some of our coverage across all layers of our automation stack. So I was just pulling pieces and putting a simple visualization together. But we found a tool that helps us visualize that coverage better across all of our automation stack, and that's made it easier. And we're still implementing it, so I couldn't show it. And just started looking at these various metrics. As I started digging in, what's more interesting is digging into metrics where you compare leading and lagging indicators. Whoops. And you look at something like this, where I was looking at the defect removal effectiveness, where you see your created versus fixed, and we had a particular release. We're much better in releases, but we had fixed a lot. And then as I was looking at, well, what were customer reported, we find this uptick in customer reported bugs. And in the defect leakage, as we look across that version, there's just a lot of hot spots across different components. And as you see, subsequent releases don't have all those hot spots. And so you go, oh, there's a leading indicator maybe we should be looking at, because we have a bad lag indicator. And hone in on that one. And this is one that stood out for us as we were throwing data at the wall and figuring out of some of these quality metrics and what data could we measure. This is out to us. Do you have any experience with data, visualizing your data, solve problems with your data as you start visualizing it and showing it?
Hey, Jana, we actually have a question from chat about the defect leakage. The question is, how would you measure if the bug is found in production was not from the most recent release? How can you correlate the defect leakage to releases?
Yeah, so this is where Domo comes in for me on this one. Because I started with Jira because that's what I had, and then we got Domo, so I started moving things to Domo, and that was actually really helpful, was to start coordinating those in Domo. But these are actually, I just cut out the versions because I need to be sensitive to what I'm showing quality wise for my company, you know. But that was already correlated with, we found these bugs in this fixed version, and this is the fixed version that the defect leakage bug reporting is happening in. I mean, that is easy enough to find and correlate, because, you know, if you're, at least with using, so if you report bugs, you report a fixed version, you report an effects version. So if it affects or was reported in a certain version, then you know that it's correlated to that particular version, that it was found in that version. And the way we handle some of our bugs, we actually duplicate the same bug per version. So we know there's only one effects version. If we need to put it in other releases, we have a different bug for that. So. Any other questions or thoughts as you guys have maybe gone through some of this exploration before and looked at anything?
There's actually a comment from Dimitri. It says, I'm not sure that any industry standards can be of any use at all.
That is true. There can be no correlation at all to your experience in your company. For me, we needed to start somewhere with some sort of recommendation, and then build off of there. So for some things, right? And so otherwise we didn't know what we should be shooting for sometimes, or what was really good or best in class. So starting somewhere for us on some of these, even if it's just a generic industry standard, was helpful for us. Yeah, I mean, we are unique. Each company is unique, and that's what makes this so hard, for sure. But like I said, you got to start somewhere, and sometimes you start by looking at your data and what you can measure and say, well, I think this is bad. Let's converse and find out, is this bad or is this good? But my directive actually from my VP of engineering was like, yeah, I think we should look at industry standards because we want it in class. So let's look at who's best in class and what those might look like, which can be a whole different conversation as well, right? What does best in class look like? Yeah, for sure. Kevin's point about how it can be different per industry, right? NASA needs 0 bugs, but not every other piece of software needs 0 bugs, right? And so it could be very different. We're in cybersecurity. We need to be best in class. So we are looking at a very high level of achievement when it comes to quality. When you're in the cybersecurity field, you have to have a lot of trust in your software, in the quality of your software. Yeah, so I see what you're saying. That takes us back to competitors for. And if they share that data, that would be great. It's really hard to find some of this data. So, let's see, next thing. So after smattering all this data against the wall and creating this big framework, we decided to narrow in on 2 occurs that we're going to focus on through the end of the year. One in particular is about unit test coverage on new and modified code. As you noticed, my test pyramid is really way out of whack. We have a lot of automation, which is great, a lot of good coverage for quality, but we're not fast. And I wish I'd talked to Carlos before I started this presentation, but at the very end of his conversation and his discussion about the software development lifecycle and the circle about each of the stages, how fast can you get through each of the stages? We want to be faster to get to a continuous testing type model. And so unit testing is pretty key and core to get faster. There are other initiatives, like we need to parallelize our end-to-end tests. You know, we can reduce and make sure we're testing more risk-based approaches so that it can be faster. There's lots of other things we can do, but these were the occurs we decided on, that we needed a broader base of unit test coverage, and we removed some of the blocks and barriers we had to that because our code is pretty old and legacy. We decided we'd look at new and modified code where most bugs would be found anyway, and that we're modifying, and we would measure code coverage on unit testing for that. And then, and we've been tracking that over time, and again, talking about this in a weekly status meeting where tech leads, quality leads, upper management, we're all in a room talking about quality, as well as, you know, release status. Are we on track? What's the risks? Again, slower process right now, but trying to get to a faster one. And then we also, because of our comparison of the one release with defect removal effectiveness, where we found a lot of bugs in-house and yet we had a lot of defects reported by customers, we want to put an eye on our defect removal effectiveness and be at an 85% removal rate. And so we're tracking by team for each release, and this is part of our quality conversations to decide if we can release. Do we have enough unit test coverage? Do we have enough defects removed, or do we need to really talk about go, no go, which is still a very slow process, but as we get better at focusing on some practices, we can get faster at improving. And these kinds of metrics and visibility, if you have them, again, in the right forum, that people are looking at it, communicating about it, have objectives about it, give you the tools you need to start making cultural quality changes. I am finding that engineers are becoming much more invested and actually putting stories in their backlog around what they need to do for unit test coverage, because we've had a different model for unit test coverage, and we've removed some of those barriers for that unit test model. You know, they're prioritizing bugs themselves, especially some of the customer reported bugs that have come in, because we keep suffering the pain of those customer reported bugs, and prioritizing those higher than the features, and having the conversation. They get the tools to have the conversation with the product owners who will favor features over bugs. And so see those changes. It's still and it's very new, but it's also an exciting one for sure. So I'll go to, we're getting close on time, which I apologize for the technical difficulties. Just kind of wanted to show some other things about metrics in my experience at my past companies, because once we started doing metrics at periodical intervals, we would do metrics, we'd have objectives, we'd track them, and then we would have retrospective about the metrics and the value of the metrics and the value that was delivered. This is from the Jeff Sutherland use case. It's out on the internet about the value that was delivered. And again, this was back in the day where maybe measuring lines of code as a productivity way was a good idea. But you can see that if you take some time to do some retrospectives, it doesn't have to be frequently, but periodically and often enough that you can review your metrics and find, is there value? Did we actually evoke the change that we needed from those metrics? Did we actually get what we wanted out of those metrics, and what kind of end result value did we get out of it? Then you have even more reinforcement for some of the metrics that you are working, proposing. This was one, same at when I was at Resolution 1, we had kind of some standard dashboard kind of stuff with bugs and test execution and things like that, defect removal. But we ended up finding that we didn't deliver quickly completed. This is works in progress with dev, this is works in progress with test, and we never completed work. We always had open work before we could release, and we just found works in progress was one of our biggest problems. And so we created an internal metric to track works in progress, created different processes for managing work in progress, so that, again, we did an assessment 6 months later after making those changes, really understanding how we set tech accrual rate, how we released faster, how we became better at what we were doing quality wise. So continuing while you have metrics and focusing them to reevaluate where's the value of those metrics and what did we get out of those metrics is a great idea as well. Fidelis, same kind of thing. I just cut out some visualizations, screenshots out of different data sources into a spreadsheet to show quality stats. We're going toward release for internal release metrics. But then we looked at the external release metrics across the releases, and we had quality problems that we continue to try to focus on things and improve internally. And then we looked at the lagging indicators to see, did it actually work? And by our 9.2 release cycle, we were reducing our catastrophic and increasing the velocity, producing way more bug fixes. We were getting to our bug backlog better, way more epics and stories. So you can increase velocity and increase quality. That's a great story that you can also tell. Any experiences you guys have with any of those quality stories around your metrics or your leading and lagging indicators and improvements there?
One of the things that we did, my last job, was we did a little bit of mob programming, which seemed to make the process increase not only in quality, but also reduce the amount of time involved with the project that we were working on. You can't do that in every situation, but in this particular situation where we were building product for students, it was basically a curriculum for second grade math students. And that mob programming that we went through, we transitioned because the amount of time it was taking us, a long time to complete product, but we found that mob programming really saved us. And not only with quality, but also quantity. Just a thought.
Hey, Daniel, for
I
everybody.
found that too.
Real quick, can we, for those who don't know, can you kind of define what this mob or ensemble programming is?
Yes, so in our case, we had a team of 4 or 5 HTML programmers who worked on content and 3 QA. And we were just, writing bugs, submitting those, and they were going back and forth. And finally, we decided just to all sit down around the computer, split up into 2 different teams, QA with 1 team, 2 or 3 developers, and we just worked on it together. And there would be 1 person driving, with the others kind of talking, asking them to do certain things, and checking certain things. We'd find bugs right there and then. They would fix them. Nothing was written up. We just fixed them, took care of it, and it was just so fast. It was pretty incredible. But like I say, I don't think that application works in every scenario, in every circumstance, but it worked for us.
No, I've been seeing the exact same thing again for our kind of product. It really works well to have the whole team sit. And so we have certain Scrum teams that have done it initially. At my previous company, we were small enough as an engineering organization. For the endpoint engineering side, there was 25 of us. We would sit and walk through the whole product and all the features all together in one room. It wasn't even a small group. And we found that had such a positive quality impact and a positive quality understanding for all people in the engineering organization, for training, cross-training on quality, as well as finding issues, right? So there was a lot of positive impact for that, for sure. That's awesome.
So I have a question though. What was the tool you used to build the dashboard? Is it something that you built on your own?
Yeah, so right now I'm using Domo. It lets you connect to all sorts of data sources so that you can pull any data source together in a bunch of KPIs in one dashboard. I started looking at Metabase, and we actually are still using that to pull in data from a few data sources for some of our tests, especially performance. We're redoing and redefining the performance engineering piece of what we're doing for our product. And so we're getting new tools in place for that. And so Metabase is another tool that it's open source and it's free. So it's been pretty easy for us to look at and figure out. Otherwise, like I said, I've like just cut and pasted from various data sources my Jenkins robot integration with the Jenkins plugin for visualization on test automation, and my Jira plugin for my Jira KPI. I've cut and pasted those into one place before as well, and just updated that like once a week, less frequently. It's so much nicer though if you just have it connected like through Domo to all the data sources, and then anytime you go there, it's there. And that is a problem with quality metrics, that you can spend a lot of time with it if you don't have an easy tool to help you along the way.
True. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyway, I think you guys have kind of answered some of these questions, but yeah, are the regular old metrics enough? Maybe, but it depends where your problems are, and if there's industry benchmark out there, but really, you may have to really create your own, and most of the time you do. It depends on a lot of factors, you know, and on and on. It's just not an easy process. It's just hard because it's so custom in so many ways to your organization. Your organization has so many different problems, but as you go through this process of defining and understanding the quality metrics that are important to your organization, you start creating a roadmap for quality, and start being able to get everybody in the organization aligned around that roadmap, which has been really helpful as I've been new coming into this organization, so that I have that aligns conversations around quality. And then, so we're almost done. A little bit over, but if you guys still want to hang out, this is the last slide for the most part. But, you know, I'm not going to talk about all of these, but really, you know, these data and quality metrics are really just the start of conversations to ask why. You want them to show reality. You know, there are metrics that help with, I guess, confidence and ensure that you feel good about what we're releasing. There's always something that needs to be improved, and so finding the metric conversations about why is it this way, what do we need to change, and you know, creating your quality story by using metrics. I've found, especially again as a new organization, and I don't know why I keep forgetting this, but being in a new organization, and even if you're in the same organization but the status quo isn't working and you know you have quality issues, to stand back and create data that tells the quality story so you can have quality conversations and continue to improve on it, I think gives you an advantage. And that's Carlos had also been talking about this. You know, everybody else in the organization creates some sort of data-driven metric. Product management does as well. They're supposed to prove that they deliver value, although I do find that I see product management can create more anecdotal data, especially in the kinds of market segments that I've been in, because we're not going for a massive market segment. It's a very small market segment that we usually go for in my product. So there's a lot of anecdotal data. And so when I created these quality metrics, I'm finding I can fight the feature heavy, anecdotal, non-data driven product managers with my very data driven quality strategy issues. And so the more data driven you get, I think the better you have to tell a quality story and to fight those quality battles. So, well, I thank you for your patience and your contributions, patience in my technical difficulties and in my continuing of learning on quality metrics. Very much, I appreciate your time. You can also get a hold of, like I said, I Googled a lot, so here's a bunch of resources. And then if you need to get in touch, feel free.
Thank you, Jana. And yes, Jana is in the QA Utah Slack group. So if you have any questions, you can even just reach out to her there, dang. Otherwise, yeah, all these other places too. Definitely get in touch. That was an amazing presentation. I think Jana's being very modest in saying that she isn't the expert or anything. Sounds like you are, dang. So awesome job. Thank you so much for taking the time to share with us.
Thanks, you guys.
For everybody else, that's it. Thank you so much for joining. If you do want to stay and chat some more, you totally can. I'll be on for like 20 more minutes. So if you do want to resume review, mock interview, code review. Just ask any questions. Feel free to hang out. We can keep talking. But otherwise, that's it. We'll see you next month.